Right, good evening, everybody. How's everyone doing? We feeling good? I'd like to welcome you here to the Royal Society of Edinburgh and to this event this evening, which, as I'm sure you know, is part of the Curious programme. As you can see, I am joined this evening by an esteemed panel of some exceptional women scientists, and I will ask them to introduce themselves in due course. But first, the boring stuff, the housekeeping. So, we are not anticipating any fire alarms this evening. So if it does go off, please don't panic and follow somebody in a purple t-shirt. Now, let me just check. There's nobody in the audience in a purple t-shirt before I say that. So our RSE staff members at the back in purple t-shirts, don't panic, but follow them, okay? You'll be guided out onto George Street to the assembly point, okay? So I think that's the boring part. I should have introduced myself first. I absolutely always forget to do that. So my name is Dr. Claire Taylor, and I'm based at Edinburgh Napier University, and I am a member of the Young Academy of Scotland, and I'm here to chair the event this evening. Forgive me for peering at you from over the top of my specs, but I can't read what I've got written down unless I've got them on. As you know, today's event is part of the Curious programme, and this is the RSE event, series of events that's taking place between the 4th and 17th of September. So we're into the last few days, and there have been a number of different events and talks and tours taking place. Also some workshops and exhibitions. I'm sure you know the theme of this year's event is Under the Surface, which is to encourage you to delve deeper, ask deep questions, look beyond the surface, and then look again. So hopefully, with our panel today, we're going to do just that. So I'll just say something briefly about myself first, and then I'm going to ask each of our panel members to introduce themselves, okay? So as I said, my name is Claire Taylor. I'm based at Edinburgh Napier University. I'm a senior lecturer in microbiology. So I teach microbiology, and I have done research in microbiology, but more recently, my interests have been focused around equality, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I don't really do any laboratory work anymore. I'm more focused on examining the life sciences and microbiology and trying to make it more inclusive and more diverse. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here this evening and to chair this discussion with these four remarkable women. I feel a little bit. I'll just briefly introduce them by name, first of all, and then I'll ask them to say a little bit about themselves. Okay, so to my far left, did I get that the right way around, is Dr. Deborah O'Neil. Here, immediately next to me on the left is Professor Mercedes Maroto-Valer. To my right here, we have Professor Raffaella Ocone, and to my far right, Professor Lesley Yellowlees. So, welcome to all of you. And if you don't mind, I'm now going to ask you to say something about yourselves, a little bit about your journey as a woman in science, and I know you've all brought something with you to tell us a little bit about what that object is and what it means to you. So if you don't mind, we'll start with Deborah.
Thank you, Claire, and good evening, everyone. So I'm Deborah O'Neil, and I'm the Chief Executive, my day job, and the founder of a company called Nova Biotics. We're based up in Aberdeen, and what we do is develop new medicines for respiratory disease, infection, and inflammatory disease. So Claire and mine's paths have crossed in the past at certain microbiology events. So we're fighting bugs as well as also disease caused by inflammation. I've been doing that for 20 years, and prior to that, I was an academic, and my training was initially in biochemistry and then in immunology, which I fell in love with. So really looking at how the body deals with microbes, it deals with inflammation during health and disease, and that's really the basis on which Novobartics does its drug discovery work, and to come up with new generations of much needed therapies for those three main areas really that are kind of interlinked. So inflammation, respiratory disease, and infection caused by bacteria as well as fungal and viral pathogens. So that's my day job. What I also do is, as well as fantastic events like this with the RSE, I sit on the board of the Bioindustry Association. So really keen to encourage more companies to spin out across the UK and to protect the businesses that we have in this sector of biomedical research, life science, and also do quite a lot up north with Opportunity Northeast and other entities that are really kind of spanning that translation and transition of fantastic research that comes out of academic labs into the commercial world. So it's great to be here this evening with a fantastic panel and looking forward to a lively discussion.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yes.
It is.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Claire. I'm Mercedes Maroto-Valer. I'm a Deputy Principal for Global Sustainability at Heriot-Watt University. It's not too far from here, but we also have campus locations in Malaysia and Dubai. So we're looking after sustainability with very different contexts, as you can imagine, and very different flavors, but really trying to embed sustainability across all the operations. I'm the first Deputy Principal for Global Sustainability in Scotland, so that's the first woman as well. Yeah, right. So you can say that. But I think it's important in terms of we need to understand sustainability, and particularly how important it is, the role they are. Sometimes it's not quite considered. So that's a point for reflection. On my other day job, I think that's probably going to be a recurring theme. You know, we all have multiple jobs. My other day job as well is I'm heading a UK centre looking after industrial decarbonisation. So really with the largest industrial clusters all across the UK and how we can help them to transition in a just transition as well. And in terms of what all this is about, and I'm just going to kind of drop it a little bit in there, my research work has really been around the theme that CO2, not all CO2 molecules are equal. And I think for many in the room here, probably that disqualify me for any RSC medal in the foreseeable future. But I think it's important that we realize that not all the activities, even if they produce the same amount of CO2, how you're actually going to be evade that CO2 or what you can do with that CO2 is not the same. And if you allow me one final point here before I show you my prop, I think we need to consider as well that the benefits, for instance, of today, all of us being here, we all have travel for maybe far or not so far distances, but we all have incurring a carbon footprint to be here today. However, I think the benefits of the conversation that we are going to have today, I do hope that they outweigh the much more tangible and quantifiable carbon footprint that we are generating by coming to this event. Is this the time to show the prop, or do we do it later?
I realised we didn't see your prop, Deborah. So
that's what I was thinking.
Shall we?
I failed.
Shall we do it now, and then we can?
So this is different from the prop that I think has had a lot of social media backlash that I appeared with in the portrait, which was Petri dishes. I mean, pretty predictable for somebody who fights bugs for a living. So this, I thought, really tells the story more of, I suppose, why I fell in love with learning and did become curious. And it wasn't actually science. I loved, and still do, history. So what I'd probably be doing, and I might answer already one of the questions for later, is I should be digging something. I'll probably be an archaeologist if I wasn't a scientist, so I'd be happy digging away at some historical site. So it probably is history that just triggered my kind of love for learning, curiosity, and a subject that I found easy, but I always knew I wanted to do science as well, so it's a trowel.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'll go ahead. I wasn't sure whether to show the prop now. Just getting into my pocket now. So it's quite small. It's actually pretty much the same that you see on my photograph, whatever it is upstairs. So I don't know if you have read the text that comes together with the photograph. I don't know. Can you see it on the back? It's something. It really looks like a domino piece. I guess that's what it looks like. But this is made of CO2. And actually, we have been able to pack close to 5 liters of CO2 into this. So going back to what I was saying before about not all CO2 molecules are equal, we can do useful things with the CO2. And this is an example. We've also been working on producing aviation fuels in many, many other projects. But there's this idea that the CO2, we can do useful things with that. That doesn't mean that we don't decrease our emissions, but I think that's the role of science. And a lot of the things that we can do together is finding uses and options with the CO2 that we are producing it, if we cannot abate it.
Thank you, Raffaella. I think you've just blown my mind a little bit. Sorry, Mercedes.
That's okay.
Apologies, my brain. Oh, no, I'm not going to say that. Right, I'm going to ask Lesley to introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. What have you done to be skipped over?
I don't know.
I'm just keeping it, keeping it fresh.
Spontaneous. Hi. Oh. Although I'll probably shout far too loud and everybody will hear. But hi, I'm Lesley Yellowlees, and I'm delighted to be here and to see you all. And I'm looking forward to this evening very much and hearing from my fellow men and also from you. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions very much. So I had my whole academic career at the University of Edinburgh, and I never moved. And people go, how can you have a whole academic career in one institution? You know, everybody says you must move, you must go here, you must go there. I stayed in Edinburgh. That being said, I didn't stay in the same job in Edinburgh all the time. I did various roles within the university, and I think that's the other thing you can do is you don't have to move, but I do think it's important that you have different experiences. I'm a chemist, and my research is into solar energy, so I'd fit very nicely with you. And I enjoyed solar energy research very much indeed. And when people ask me, after all this time, Lesley, if you could go back and do your PhD again, what would you do it in? And I say I'd still do it in solar energy because we've still not cracked it. We've still not got it. We've still not got it at an affordable price that everybody can use. And we certainly haven't sorted out how we can use solar energy with batteries to be able to store that energy. So there's still a whole lot of questions to be asked. And I think it's unusual it's many years ago. So I did my PhD 45 years, dare I say that? A long time ago. And I think it's unusual to have a subject that still hasn't come to fruition, hasn't reached its end point yet. So I still am fascinated by solar energy, and I still think I think it is part of the solution. I'm not saying it's the whole solution, and I'm not saying it's the whole solution in Scotland, but it is going to be part of the mix, part of the solution. As well as having, as we're all talking about data, as well as having an academic career in research, I also got heavily involved in management within the university. I was head of school, head of chemistry, and then I was head of the College of Science and Engineering at the University of Edinburgh, which is a huge college. It's bigger than most universities actually in Scotland. So it was a big responsibility, a huge opportunity, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed being head of the College of Science and Engineering. At the same time as doing all that, I was also heavily involved in the Royal Society of Chemistry, which is the professional society for chemists, or people in chemical sciences, both industry and academia in the UK. And it was my privilege to be asked to be their president. And I was their first female president in their 170-year history. And I thoroughly enjoyed being president of the Royal Society of Chemistry. That was my dream job. So I retired. I stopped. Unfortunately, I could only be president for 2 years. I would have continued, but they didn't want me to continue. Well, you can't. So but I would have continued because, you know, that's the life, swanning about the world. That's great. But I did retire from being vice principal and head of the College of Science and Engineering. To take up, people say I've now got, you know, a portfolio. I've got lots of different things I do, and I'm happy to discuss those. But you know, and I really enjoy doing all this, bringing the experience I had, the people I know, to doing things outside of the University of Edinburgh and outside of chemistry now. So, and I count myself as very fortunate being able to do that. So my object, I've lost it. Small period. This is my object. And this is a statue of, a bust of Nefertiti, which I should think if you'd asked anybody, nobody would have said I would have brought this out. But this is what this is what I brought out. Why is this important to me? When I was president of the Royal Society of Chemistry, I was asked what it is I wanted to concentrate on doing. And I said, well, I'm the first woman, so I think it'd be daft not to use that as a platform. This was in 2012, when really things were starting to take off. EDI, equality, diversity, and inclusion, was really starting to be a big thing. And I used that. And I traveled the world speaking about chemistry, but also about equality and diversity. And I was fortunate to go to Ethiopia at one time to a PACN meeting, that's Pan-African Chemistry Network. It had not been going long. The Royal Society of Chemistry gave all its journals to them for free to help African chemists start. And I remember meeting a professor from Egypt who gave me this. And she said, it's really important, Lesley, that you come and you are visible, particularly in Africa, but all across the world, because there are not enough senior women out there spreading the word and speaking to them. And every time I look at this, I think of her words and think, you know, we've all got a duty to go out there and tell the word, you know. Say to everybody, this is what's possible for you. Go and achieve. So that's my bust of Nefertiti.
Wonderful, thank you, Lesley. But as president, could you not have changed the constitution? Apparently some presidents do that.
So, as president, I was interviewed by a magazine, by a professional journal at one time, just as I was about to start. And they said to me, how is the Royal Society of Chemistry? You know, is it, you know, have you cracked it? And I said, no, I haven't cracked it. We haven't cracked it. It's not sorted yet. It's not sorted. The headlines in this journal, and this is a lesson to everybody, be careful what you say. The headlines in this journal were, new president sacks council. I had a lot of phone calls to me.
Well, that's how to start a presidency with a bang, isn't it? For sure. Right. Thank you. And Raffaella.
It's my turn, I suppose. Hello, good evening to everybody. My name is Raffaella Ocone. I'm professor of chemical engineering at Heriot-Watt. As you can spot from my beautiful Scottish accent, I'm originally from Italy, and I've been in Scotland a long time, despite I didn't pick up the accent. My journey started really in Italy. I think I have to confess, I'm a very boring person. I did my first degree in engineering, my master in engineering, my PhD in engineering, and then I worked all in engineering departments. And I came to Scotland in 1999, and I was last century first female, first female chemical engineer in Scotland. Strictly speaking, actually, probably in the UK, because the older one was the only other female professor of chemical engineering. Actually, she had a degree in polymer science, which, strictly speaking, it's not chemical engineering. Anyway, I have been working on Harriet Watt for a long time. I'm not going to bother you with Harriet Watt. Mercedes has already told you how beautiful Harriet Watt is, so I'm not going to do that again. My area of expertise, I have a general thread in my area of expertise, which is mainly energy. And I have to confess, I started last century. I was working in oil and gas. Sorry. However, I can spot in the audience my partner in crime. Professor Aliotta came here. We will walk back home because she lives close by. We are neighbors, so I'm sure that we walk back and we are not going to produce any CO2, only what we breathe. Anyway, well, it's inevitable. Anyway, having said all that, I have worked, seriously, I worked in oil and gas, and of course, we are now into the transition into new kind of energies. And like Lesley rightly said, Mercedes made the point about CO2, we need a mix, we need a different kind of energies for the future. And at the moment, my main interest is production of hydrogen to contribute to the transition, the energy transition. Another thing that I would like really to stress today, it's one of the things that I'm really proud of. Of course, being the first female professor of chemical engineering, you can imagine that, I had many chores and many things to do, and one of those was ED&I when it just started. And I have to say that if I reflect now back, the last 20 years, things have changed enormously, rightly so, but the pace is still really low. And I think that we have to accelerate the pace, and this is something which we need to do, and we need to work hard on that. But another area which also I have of great interest is ethics in engineering. And have to confess that I started with ethics in engineering simply because I wanted to show to my brother, who is a very well-accomplished philosopher. Yes, people can make money with philosophy, with being philosopher, not philosopher, being philosopher. So my brother is a very well-accomplished philosopher. I want to show him that engineers can do philosophy, philosophers cannot do in engineering. Sorry, I want to be honest here tonight. I could say something different, but please bear with me. So, and actually, this is not true. I couldn't really do philosophy like the way he does it, but I just, that was a very good education for me, because by learning a different discipline, by learning how ethics, moral philosophy can influence what we do in engineering, helps us also to have another perspective about our work in engineering. And at the end of the day, the engineers do things that are used by everybody. And then we have to make sure that we do things that really can be used by everybody in an ethical way. And so I'm extremely proud of this other area of my research. And what I brought today is exactly the same thing that I brought, which I have in my picture that you can see on the wall. And this is not a hourglass, it's something different. It shows, it's not sand, actually this is semolina. It's chosen just because it's a specific kind of size, particle size, and specific kind of density for the particles. And depending on the inclination of this hopper here, when you discharge it, you can create different kind of flow. Here, you can see the middle is going down, and at the wall is not going down, while the same material here goes down altogether. Extremely important in chemical and process industries. Close to your, there is they produce biscuits, right? Very close to your side. Along the road, A70, after 20 more years, I 71. Still do 71. And they are kept in big silos, and they are discharged. And it's extremely important, especially when you have materials which can be degradable, that it comes out all together. So force goes, force in, force out. If it stays at the wall and then it degrades and then can produce also things which are not good for health, essentially. And why do I have this one? Well, when I did my PhD, I moved from Italy to the United States, and I wanted to work in polymer science. I want to work in plastics. I want to understand everything about producing things from plastic. Went to Princeton, and surely enough, the professor I wanted to work with went 1 year on sabbatical, and then he left. And I was left on my own. So I had to make a choice, and I made a choice. I went around, and I found out that there was this professor working with sand. And I said, probably I can do some experiment on a beach. Good way to go back to Italy. And then I decided to change completely and go and work for him. So when I look at this, I think, well, sometimes things that really upset you, and I was very upset that the person I wanted to work with left, can come into opportunities and for the future. So I really enjoy now working with particles, which are in a way much more complicated than polymers. And then yes, the opportunity was there, and so I was very lucky to have that opportunity. So that's me.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Wow. Well, as you know, we sat here hearing about wonderful achievements. My colleagues here being the first to do something, the first of this, the first of that. I mean, it's pretty remarkable when you think about it and where we are. And I read recently it's going to take something like 132 years before we reach gender parity in the world. And you talked about the pace of progress, and everything is too slow. So let's dig in, and let's talk about what can we do. So my first question: what do you think? What do we need to do? Who do we need to pressure in order to accelerate the progress that we've made so far? And which of the initiatives that you know of do you think have been the most successful? I'm going to go to Lesley, because I know Lesley will know. No, but I know you have some experience. And then...
So things are improving, thank goodness, but not quickly enough. But then I'm impatient. And I do think if we want things to change and remain changed, then we have to make sure that that's done correctly, it's done properly, that the support is there. For example, I never wanted to be the first woman. I wanted to be the first woman president of the Royal Society of Chemistry. I didn't want to be the last. I think to be the one and only is not good news either, because it sort of smacks as if you've done the experiment and that either it hasn't worked or whatever. And I'm delighted to say I think they're on to about their fourth or fifth. The new president, again, is to be a female. And in fact, there have been, since I was president, there have been fewer men than women presidents. So I think that's great. There has also been another woman head of chemistry at Edinburgh, so I take that as a credit. There's not yet been another vice principal and head of science and engineering, a woman, but, I can't but hope. So I think it's important that we make sure it's done properly and that people have the support, and that people that everyone feels that they've got their part to play, and we're all individuals, and you can bring your strength to that. But it is important to support people while they do that. So I've always felt that it was, that was one thing I could do, was to help people. And to, if you want to break through a glass ceiling or whatever you want to do, but to then make sure you throw the ladder down to help people, to help people up. I've always found that was important. I've always felt that it was important to give back. And that's really what that I now get a lot of pleasure out of doing, is giving back and helping people to do that. It is important that leaders understand that that they get why they should have a diverse team. I mean, people talk about having a diverse team. I think it's incredibly important. I mean, I've led loads of teams, but the more diverse the team was, the better the results and the quicker the result happened. So I think it is important to work in a diverse team, but to get a diverse team, you need people to understand why you wouldn't pick your best friend or the person that was in your own image. Because, I mean, you know, it's good, isn't it, to get together and have a coffee with somebody that you know really well, but is that necessarily going to be helpful? So I think it's getting the message across that you do need to support people, and that is what, that we have to do that. And whether, I count leaders, but it has to be politicians, it has to be leaders in industry, it has to be leaders in education, it has to be leaders across all walks of life. People need to get the message and then promote it as well. And sometimes they'll need support at promoting it. So I'm all for support. That's my message, support.
Can I say something? I think that we have made too much, well, rightly so, we have stressed a lot women, gender. I think that diversity for me is much more than that. And I think that we have to support all kinds of diversities. And one of the diversities that I think is very little acknowledged at the moment is like disabling people, and they cannot do everything that we do, and that is appalling. And also the engineering artifacts that we do create have to have in mind the user. And sometimes most of the things that you use are just not made for women, are not made for somebody who is disabled. I personally believe that this kind of, what we can do in accelerating the pace is just support, communicate, and embed it. Because for me, it's embedding. It's not the law that is there, and then you have to create the way to come to this room. It has to be embedding in the way we think. It's the way we think about what we are producing that has to embed the diversity in that. And when I was a student, when I was young, I never cared so much for the environment. It was not there, simply was not there. I like to think that now we are at this, now everybody is concerned about the environment. We do things, we recycle that are to make sure that we do what we have to do. I want to think that this is what we are going to do next. We do automatically things for diversity without having the law that enforces something for that, because we really believe in it. And I think that it's the only thing that can accelerate. So communicate and think about the work that you do that has to be really tailored to embed diversity. And like I said, I'm diverse because I speak with another accent. I mean, I might have some other diversity that I don't like to speak about, but all of us are diverse, and that is what is really relevant to me. Sorry.
Please don't be sorry. Yep, and you're absolutely right. You know, we are all multidimensional, and we don't talk about it often enough, I think. We use the phrase intersectionality is the way we should consider people. You're not just a woman, you're a woman with this or that, or, you know, a person of a different colour. We don't talk enough about that. Deborah, in industry, diversity must be hugely important to you.
Absolutely, and it's a strange thing. It's changing at the biotech level. So we have a gender imbalance in the Northeast, where most of the founders and CEOs of the biotech companies are female. Great problem to have, as far as I'm concerned. And it's just, you know, you sort of think, well, why? It just is what it is. The mentoring and the support's been there, and this attitude of, well, yeah, why not? You know, I can do that. And this perception of, yes, but you're a scientist, you know, as well as being female. What, you can't run a company. So, well, I can. And in the 20 years I've been doing that, that has certainly changed. You know, this idea of the academic absolutely sticking with it and not just being the chief scientist. You know, that actually, no, you can step up and you can lead the whole organisation. but sort of look at Big Pharma, there's still only 2 female CEOs running global pharmaceutical companies. And that's just not happening. There's a change because it tends to be now, again, medics or even MD PhDs who are at the helm, who are the leaders of global pharma companies, not accountants and not just business people. But, you know, what's happening there? And they'll say, no, my board's diverse. Look at my board. But are you ticking boxes there? So, you know, when the ultimate leader's selected, still doesn't seem to be a female. So it's interesting that the self-selection of, you know, the biotechs, the emerging companies, it's female science leaders stepping up and doing it. But at the top still, where there's that structure, we're not quite there. But I hope that I agree, you know, change is happening. It's not fast enough. That it, you know, it will eventually come. But yeah, I think that the time scales to get there are just, yeah, not acceptable.
Yes, I think, you know, some of us will recall that we've probably been having very similar conversations for a number of years, decades, in some cases. And of course, that's, you know, that's why we're here tonight, to keep reminding ourselves that we have to keep pushing for progress. And, I, you know, we're hearing about where change is happening. So what exactly is going on up in the northeast then? That's you know, what can we learn? What's been role modelled up in the northeast that we can maybe spread a bit further across Scotland?
I think it's back to the network and the support and the mentoring, that there's no perception of it can't be done. You know,
Okay.
well, it just can be. You know, why can't I take that next step? And I guess, you know, we're life scientists. I think it tends to be fairly balanced, if not in some cases, in some biological sciences, slightly biased towards women, you know, in terms of the research associates, even people coming through PhDs and postdocs, but there's still that pyramid effect. You know, the leaders aren't there in general, but in the northeast we do have this great microclimate, and I think it's the biotech industry there is emerging. The perceptions probably aren't there of I can't do it, and there's just a system. I'll just step back and I'll support the company, but, you know, I won't necessarily lead it. And this is even probably for, you know, women who've led academic groups. You know, they are leaders already. I think it's just that historical issue of in industry, yeah, but you're not leading here. And I think for me as well, the strange thing is that there's always an age thing, and I'm going back to many years ago when I was in my 30s, but also, you know, you don't have the grey hairs, so you can't be a leader. It's not just on natural ability. And of course, I haven't got any grey hairs now. This is all natural. But so that was a strange thing as well. I said, oh, you know, a young female scientist wanted to step up and be a leader of something that, you know, is now a private enterprise as well. So I think, you know, we're getting it right in Aberdeen. We do seem to be bucking some trends. I really hope that sticks. We need those companies to be successful. And definitely the female CEOs, and I know they are, bringing female talent through, and, you know, the academics, I think, seeing female leaders anyway, but even the ones that want to spin their own businesses out, seeing that, and it not even being a question of them not being able to do it. The precedent's kind of there. So I hope it continues, and I hope in terms of the rest of Scotland and even the UK, that's a model that, yeah, will be rolled out.
Fantastic.
Definitely agree with everything has been said so far. If I can add something, I think echoing what you were saying, it's a campaign that we have been working on for 12 months, and it's called "You Can't Be What You Can't See." So it's pretty much aligned to that, and this is part of the the UK centre that I'm leading, IDRIC for short, and we have created a YouTube channel, and we publish probably less than every month, more frequent than that. We publish a video where there is actually somebody working on the energy transition with very, very different backgrounds, very different careers, and how they got there. And the way we try to get that, because it's also about where do you get these messages, right? So what we have been doing is we go to schools and ask them to get a question that they would like to ask to somebody working in the energy transition. Then we ask that question to the person that we are filming, and then we take that video back to the school, so they actually can't really associate with that. That's a question that they have asked, and it has been answered. And it opens up the opportunities and really gets them into this YouTube channel with, I think we have 20 plus videos. And this is just an opportunity, an example of something that happens. I'm sure that across the room there are many things that we are doing, and with my fellow panelists, but there is one other message that I think is quite important to reflect on. And we've been talking about solar energy and hydrogen and different things that we need to do going forward, and net zero and all that. But I think if there's something that we are going to run out in terms of our energy transition and in terms of getting net zero, we are not going to run out of solar energy or hydrogen. What we are running right now today is we are running out of skills, because we don't have a diverse skill force and an inclusive one that can actually help us in the transition. So I think we need to be thinking in terms of, we are not only doing it for all the right things, we are doing it because we are really going to need it if we are actually going to meet a series of goals in terms of targets of health and net zero. So I think it's important we keep that narrative as well. We need all decks on hand. All hands on deck. I said that the other way around, right? So we need all hands on deck to actually make sure that we really achieve these goals and these grand challenges, whether they are grand challenges that have to do with health, grand challenges that have to do with energy, grand challenges that have to do with a social dimension. All of them are. And I think that's really important as well to think of.
I just want to say one other thing, and I wanted to say it at the end in case I appear too sycophantic here, but I do think things like the Royal Society of Edinburgh have an important part to play, and so that wonderful exhibition you did, I know we're fabulous in it, but the amount of people that saw it in the airport, for example, and the amount of people that came and spoke to me about that and said, what's it all about? I think that has a huge part to play. But it requires something like the Royal Society of Edinburgh to do that, because we individually can't do that, but collectively we can take part in it. So I think it's important that we use, and tonight's another good example. So I think you have an important, and I'm looking at Sarah here because she's leading now. So I think it's an important, don't lose sight, keep going, because it's not cracked, it's not sorted, it's not solved. So I would just implore you to keep going, because if you don't, then I think it's poorer.
Thank you, Lesley. Good point, well made, for sure. I think the thing for me, though, is sometimes a lot of what we talk about and hear about is this idea that there are deficits in women and they should fix this and they should fix that, which you can tell probably from my tone I don't agree with. We shouldn't be expected to fix this by ourselves, right? This is not a problem we made. Why should we fix it? So what can we do? What do we need to do to, and I'm going to put this in some polite terms, encourage what we call active allyship? How do we do that? Aye.
Well, I think there is something good for everybody, and I think that if there is a law which is good for a woman, it's good also for a man. And I think that if you do something for disabled people, it doesn't matter if you are a woman or a man. So I think that there are basic principles that are not based on gender, and that's the way to get allies. I remember when I arrived to Harriet Watt, of course the principal calls me and says, oh, we have to do something about about diversity and inclusion, and Athena's one was just coming, this scheme for women in academia was just coming out, and we ran a questionnaire, and we made a big mistake. We ran the questionnaire for women, send it only to women. Big mistake. When I read what it was coming out from the questionnaire, I realized, but if a woman is asking me to have a better staff room, I'm just making, or bed facilities, this is going to be good also for a man. So I think that the message here should not be like we are doing this because it's good for the women. It's good for everybody. Mercedes spoke about skills. I mean, if you enlarge the pool and you have more people participating into the pool, of course, I mean, you have more possibility of being successful. I think that, by excluding automatically and making discriminations and excluding some part of the population, we actually are doing bad to ourselves, because in a way, and this is the message that we have to give to everybody, so why should we limit the pool when we can include everybody? And automatically, I know that many, I can see some of my colleagues, male colleagues, are allies. I mean, they want to be on board. They feel about being positive and supportive. And I think that we have to be very open, and that's the only way we can do. I think it's automatic, actually. They will come on board. They are already on board.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of allies.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're all allies here, so I hope.
We'll not ask for a show of hands. Okay. I'm going to ask you, let's maybe find out a little bit more about you as just regular people, because whilst we've heard about some of your amazing achievements, I think the other thing we need to remember is that we are just regular people, right? So let's hear from you something about something in your life that you're really proud of, whether it's something scientific, something just in your regular life, or in your career. Let's have some insight. I'm looking at you, Deborah. You just happen to be in my eye line.
Claire, thank you. Can I do one of each quickly?
Of course you can.
So I think I always say I do have the best job in the world, and probably have people arguing on that one. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing, that translation of science into potentially impacting patients who need it. So I think, proudest moment is when you get into fairly advanced clinical trials with something that you've invented or developed, and even if it's in a clinical trial, you see even one patient benefit from it. That's pretty amazing, and it makes all the bad days really worth it. So incredibly proud, and on behalf of the team at Novobotics as well, of what we've done in that regard. Personal life. I think there's a few people in the audience that know me very well. I think probably I love history, as I've said, and I do live in very old houses, and every time I move I say I'll never do another one, but I think it's also a bit of a legacy in kind of restoring the properties that I've had, and just thinking, well, that's another nice stamp as you move forward. So I love that. I'm proud of what I've done, and also probably looking after my horses. That's my therapy. So having all the equines seemingly living forever in great shape as well. So a bit of a weird insight into my non-scientific life.
So if I need some DIY, perfect.
Yeah.
Mercedes.
Yeah, so I think in terms of professionally, I think is just looking at nurturing talent and how good your students do. And I think something that makes me very proud is when I write an email to one of my former students, now graduate, and asking them to provide a letter of support for my proposal, right? The kind of that really makes, this student really made it, right? And they write really good letters as well, right? So I think it's that moment where you realize the impact of what you are doing, it just translates well beyond your really direct environment. So I think that's really very proud. Yes, but they do write great letters as well, so for proposals, so I definitely recommend it. I think on a personal side, I think it's when it has nothing to do with my job and I'm just the mother of, right? And I think that's really just because when you're in academia, it's really important in terms of getting your papers and your projects and everything. And then suddenly all of that disappears and you're just a mother of, and I have 3 of those mother of, by the way. So it's really that unique moment where you completely can dissociate what is your profession and really you do things because you want to have the next generation of children and young people to do well and have a planet. And I say this when I was asked, what is your motto? And I said, well, and probably other people have said this as well, is I want to leave a planet at least the way I found it. And I say that because I'm a mother. And I want to leave that for my children. And then by extent, what happens is that my job allows me to do that. So it's just a wonderful, and I get paid for that as well, right? So it's really the same as you were saying, right? It's really that opportunity that we have had to make a contribution and doing it in a way that you are actually fulfilling yourself professionally and personally.
Wonderful, thank you. Raffaella.
Right. Let me start personally. I think that one of the things which I'm most proud of is that I learned to play piano in old age very badly. But nevertheless, I learned it. And it was always something that I wanted to do in my life because I love music, I love classical music, and I couldn't play. So I decided in a late age to start to learn, play very badly. But it doesn't matter. It makes me feeling proud that at least I can do it. And professionally, well, I think that, of course, all the academics have a little bit of what Mercedes was saying, to nurture the talent and to teach is one of the biggest achievements. I mean, in chemical engineering, when you show in front of a class for the first time and they don't know anything about chemical engineering, you give them the fundament, and I think you feel proud when they finally understand it. But I think probably one of the things that I'm very proud of is a little piece of it's a methodology to look at some chemical reactions actually which makes a process much more efficient, and then it has been adopted by companies, and that has brought to some real results in terms of impact because it was adopted by the company, and the company could see the results in terms of making it more effective, consuming less energy. So I think that's the thing that professionally I'm more proud of. So, like I said, very basic stuff, but that probably makes myself proud of.
It's making you human.
You.
It's making you you.
It's you.
Oh, thank you. So, coming last, you sit there and think, yes, I can tick all those boxes. I'm happy, but with everything, and I agree with what everybody said. I'm going to be much more selfish, though, and much more into me, and just say the thing I'm most proud of is when I got a CBE, because I got it for my EDI work and for what I'd done. And, I'd put a lot of effort into that, and so to have people put me forward for that just made me feel so proud and so happy that people had understood what I was about. So that's, for me, professionally. I mean, we can all, I can come up with all the experiments and things, but what made me happiest was that. Personally, I'm with you, Mercedes, that is my children. I have 2 children, and now I'm a grandmother. I'm that old, I'm allowed to be a grandmother now. And when I started, I said, when I was doing things, I wanted to make it better for my daughter. I didn't want my daughter to have to work through what I'd worked through. Now I have to say I want my granddaughter not to have to do it because, it is going slowly. So I've had to skip generations. And let's hope I don't have to, let's hope I'm still here, but, you know, let's hope I'm not having to say my great-granddaughter, but my grandchildren now, I've got twins, and they're hilarious, they're 5. And I met them from school, which is why I was late today to come here. But you've got to get your priorities. You know, I have managed to do both, but my children and my grandchildren.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn over to the audience shortly, but before we do, I just want to ask each of you one more thing. Okay, so I know, it's like, what's it going to be? And only one, please, from each of you. What's one piece of advice you would want to give a young person who's starting out in science now? Just one.
Believe in yourself.
Okay.
Do only the things that you like, because otherwise you will be miserable all your life. I am lucky because I have a job that I enjoy. If you have a job that you don't enjoy, you will be miserable. So do science, but only if you really like it, and try to like it, but do what you like in science.
Very good advice. Mercedes.
It was actually very similar to what I have said, maybe a slightly different angle. For me, it's about be true to yourself in whatever you do, whatever you decide to do. Because if you're gonna excel in whatever you do, but you do it in a way that is not true to who you really are, you're just not gonna be happy. So I think whatever career, whatever path, whatever it is that makes you happy, be true to yourself. And I think then everything else will just fall into place. Although sometimes it doesn't seem like it's going to do, because everything else has been done for a very long time in a very different way. And we are thinking about doing these that are not maybe the way they have been done. But it does pay off. It doesn't seem like that every day sometimes, but it's just truth to yourself. What then in reflection you realize, I don't have regrets because I did it in a way that it was true to the way I believe and the way I think.
See, it's tough now, isn't it? I mean, how do you follow that? I think I'll do sort of a 2-for-1. I'd agree absolutely with all of that. And you do have to enjoy it, and it's about enjoying the journey necessarily, because I think in science you may never reach the destination you think you were going to try to get to. There may never even be a destination. Absolutely trust that gut instinct, the voice in yourself in a good way, not in a I need help way. And even if the naysayers say you can't do it, yes, listen. Test maybe what you want to do off people, but absolutely, as Mercedes said, it's believing in yourself, staying true to yourself as well, and enjoying that journey, because science can be a long haul, even the kind of academic path to getting where you need to be. And enjoy the journey, definitely, whatever destination you get to.
Fantastic, thank you. I think write that down, although you're probably not likely to forget it, are you? Right, at this point, I would like to invite you, the audience, to ask our panellists some questions. So, excellent. Hand up straight away. So Hannah's got a microphone there. So
hi there.
If you want to say your who you are and ask away.
Yeah, sure. My name's Rachel Arthur. I run an organisation called Boom Saloon, which is not in the fields of either science or academia, but that kind of shapes my question, which I will try and word somewhat succinctly. I was just wondering, as an outsider, how you all feel that the likes of the fields of science and academia are doing in terms of how they bridge the gap with the wider world. Because as someone who sits and exists and works outside of that sphere, we spent quite a lot of time knocking on doors and having conversations. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but I find it somewhat frustrating that it feels like there's so much knowledge and insight that sits in these silos that can feel quite inaccessible. So I just wondered if you had any comments on that, or ideally any tips on how we might bridge those gaps, if you think that is a fair way of looking at things.
Aren't I glad I'm not on the panel? Okay, who wants to kick us off?
Well, I'm happy to start off. I mean, it's just the Royal Society, it's events like this. I think it's absolutely upon us, and I'm speaking as someone who I guess a career spanned academia and kind of science in the private sector. You know, there's a duty to communicate that and to make the information that, you know, we're generating accessible. Obviously, where it is relevant to the public and it's interesting and it can be helpful. So completely agree. And as academic scientists, you know, we obviously publish, we share things amongst our peers, but completely agree, you know, we have to do that to, you know, the general public, lay audiences, and I think it's a critical part of what we do, and to not do that, as you say, in kind of silos and generating stuff that could be of interest and of value, and not making that accessible or communicating it. So I suppose it's just the mechanisms, other than organisations like, you know, the RSE, how that can be done better, and not just Googling things, obviously.
Well, I think that there is an issue about the fact that in academia, unfortunately, since the reward is publishing in learned journals, peer-reviewed, we tend to publish in journals that are not accessible to everybody. And I don't want to criticize my employers or our employers in general, but I believe that, you know, there is something fundamentally wrong in academia, that the reward comes about how much you've published and how much money you have brought. And there is the research exercise framework, so-called REF, where, of course, I mean, you have to publish so many papers, you have to bring so much money. The more you bring, the more you are good. I think that this is really, we are not doing the service that we should do to that money, actually, because that is taxpayers' money. And I think that, very importantly, we should encourage more communication of what we do in a language which can be accessible to everybody, and that is something which we don't do, or at least we do very little. And when we do it, we do on our free time. I write things that probably some of my colleagues believes that is just rubbish, because it's a little bit philosophical. But I do it in the evenings. I do it at the weekend because during the day I have to do other things. Otherwise, my boss is not going to be happy. So I believe that it's the system that should change. We can communicate. The RSC is doing great about this, but I think that we have to realize that other things needs to be rewarded, and we have to make what we do more accessible. Having said that, we have to publish also in journals that are peer-reviewed, because otherwise science doesn't advance. But I think that there is also an aspect of being more communicating what we do in a very simple way. I mean, I made you the example about the silos which are close to your campus. I mean, you can relate to everyday life. You don't need to be very specific. I don't need to explain to you what is really that's going on to make you understanding that that's an important issue there.
So I think you raise an interesting and valid point, and it's one that's been kicked around for a long time now. I have watched with interest, though, within academia, how we've had to break out of silos, and we work in teams now, and it's no longer sufficient to work in science. You have to bring your social scientists on board. You have to make sure that you are getting the message across, and that people understand what it is you're trying to do and what they can contribute to doing that. So I think we are trying to do that, and to be able to do that, we have to look much broader than the discipline in which we work. And I think that is what's happening. But there are also places, there's enterprises such as Interface that are out there that are there to help businesses connect to academia. So there are institutions, there are bodies out there that will help to connect the two together. But it's always about knowing who to speak to. And it is about knowing the person and knowing the bodies that you can go and speak to about things. And I know that we've got Google, which is our old friend, that we can just dial into and get that. But nothing beats the personal introduction, does it? And so it's meeting people, I think, and it's you helping us to help you. You know, I think that's important as well. Don't just say, I don't know. I mean, I think we have an onus, but I think everybody else has an onus as well to make sure that we can connect as much as possible, because there's a lot of clever people out there, and there's a lot of people with a lot of ideas and a lot of kit and a lot of stuff to be able to help you with. And we're looking for we're looking for people to help as well, you know. So I think it's a two-way street, and keep it open and keep the dialogue going.
Yes, I think a couple of points from me, and I think generally across the sector is becoming more and more awareness around our civic role and our civic role around the communities where we are and how we engage with them. So I think that's coming more. It's not completely cracked the problem, let's say, and hopefully I don't get into any headlines by using those sort of words, Lesley, but I think it's our civic role. I think that's something it has to be much more at the forefront of the activities that we do. And then I think building also with what Lesley was saying, I think what we need is spaces for that dialogue. I think we need to embed that dialogue. And if I think about the research that we do now in some of the projects within my team, this is not about developing a technology. This is about having a social license to operate the technology. And that social license to operate the technology, you have to embed it into your research in day one. Otherwise, you're going to have a useless product. So I think it has to be a lot more of the dialogue. And I think, as you said, Lesley, we have to come more together. It's how do we create those spaces that universities actually saw their purpose as civic, their civic role, but also we need to have that community coming forward and help us in terms of that civic role. So I think it's a bit both sides the way we need to do this.
Well, I think you can tell that there are some very willing people up here on the stage that maybe you want to have a chat to in a bit more detail. Okay. Okay. The hands are shooting up now. So I think the first one I spotted was right at the back.
Hi, my name is Camila. And I wonder, what would you say are the factors or the ingredients that enables you to get to the place you are right now in your career? You are always successful, but I wonder if were like external factors or the decisions that you made. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Who wants to go? Lesley.
I'll go. Ingredients to get there. Sounds like a cookery book. So part of me wants to say bloody-mindedness, that, you know, and that, I'm afraid that has a large part to play. I think it's looking for the opportunities. So, you know, go and look for opportunities, go and see what's out there. Don't be afraid to say yes. We're always said, oh, you've got to learn how to say no, but I think it's equally important to say yes and to absolutely embrace what it is, the opportunity that's, you know, that's there. Go and take it. Go and see. I mean, you know, I've changed direction many times. And I would always say to you, to anybody, just make sure you don't slam the door behind you, because then if your opportunity doesn't work out, and actually you can usually make it work out, but if it doesn't, there's always somewhere else you can go. So that would be my observation from my own experiences, is what I've tried to live by, and yeah, I think it's been quite a successful way to be. So, but that would be my combination.
I think we can agree it's definitely been a success. Mercedes.
I think maybe from my side is when I was in a school or high school or even in university, I never planned that I would be a professor one day. I think it was more in terms of what I wanted to do, but I didn't have clear what my career path was going to be. And I think we tend to have too much of this career path that seem to be one direction. And going back to what you were saying before, it's not really a one direction and it's not a ladder. There are so many different ways and so many diversions in the journey that you take till eventually you get to your destination. But to get to your destination, I've taken quite a different path from Lesley. I've been working at both sides of the pond in a couple of very different institutions as well, a large and medium. And I think it's for me what it has been is about, probably similar to what you were saying though, Lesley, is about when those opportunities were presented, I took them most of the time. So if I felt I wanted them, I just went for them. And I think it's a word that keeps many times saying, oh, somebody was lucky, right? Sometimes somebody so-and-so was lucky. Well, for me, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. Then is when luck strikes. And I think it's when that opportunity comes, if you are prepared to take it, then is when luck comes on board. But I think it's just make judgments, whatever happens in your life. And going back to what we're saying now about personal life, I've been taking decisions, very different decisions through my career, because some cases I didn't want to travel because I have children. In other cases now I can travel, or maybe I don't want to do certain things. So it's really about those decisions that are right for the moment you are in your life. And that will change, but that's fine. You just have to be happy with that.
Absolutely. I think you don't overplan because you never know what the plan really is. And if you try and stick to a plan that you might create now, you're not going to be able to say yes to those opportunities and then benefit from them. So I think for me, I mentioned I did a biochemistry degree. I did the broadest degree I could think of. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And even stepping back a little bit, I knew I wanted to do something in biomedical research. And I found my way at each step, and things kind of funneled down to the point that, I knew I loved immunology, and I finally found the field that I wanted to work in. Never expected to work in the US. But again, the opportunity to do my first postdoc came up. I think my PhD supervisor certainly lost the bet that he'd never see me again because the shopping in California would be too good. Did come back. But to Belgium, never expected to do that, but an opportunity came up and I learned molecular biology, and I thought, well, that's fantastic. That was never on my radar. It was never in a plan, but I said yes because that was a great thing to do, and that led me to an academic post at the Rowett because I knew one of the governors of the institute, because that was still in my field of research, happened to be at a conference where soon-to-be colleagues at the Rowett in Aberdeen were. Everything falls into place if you sort of keep that open mind, have that sense of direction of travel, but don't overplan, seize those opportunities. And in a few decades, you look back and think, wow, I didn't plan to get here, but it feels as if I always should have got to where I am now. And be tenacious.
I want to be a little bit more of an engineer here, boring. I want to give you the right recipe. Challenging. Okay, start with something that you like and invest in that thing, become an expert in that area. Because I think that what we are seeing today is that people go a little bit there and there and there, and they are not really expert in an area. When you are becoming expert in an area, just enlarge all your horizon. I didn't want to say that, but of course one of the most proud thing, I didn't want to look selfish, was when I became a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. My peers thought, she's a good engineer. But they know me for particle technology. It's what I have done at the beginning of my career. Now I can work in different areas and take the opportunities, like that's been said, when they arise. And say yes, like Lesley said, but also there is I used to call it luck and being at the right place at the right time. But it's also saying yes, which makes you being at the right time in the right place. But my advice is that trust yourself and think that have much confidence on yourself. And if you like what you do, you will succeed. Oh, have I don't like to call it mentor, but have somebody who can give you an advice and see things from a different perspective. Speak to somebody who can be a critical friend. That critical friend doesn't need to tell you always say, oh, you are doing great, but just needs to be critical, telling you when you have not done things. And another thing, don't have a role model. There are many role models out there. I have one role model for one thing, another role model for another thing. Don't look just at one person. I never thought, like Mercedes, to become an academic. I wanted to work in a real industry, chemical industry. And then I went to do my final year research project, and I want to become like my professor. He was male. But I want just to become like him. I want to teach like he was doing. I didn't want to become like him, like he was drinking, he was smoking, he was loud. I didn't want to. He was not my role model for that things, but he was my role model for the way he was teaching and the way he was making people wanting to do that stuff, the way he treated students. I had that role model. I have another role model for another thing. So don't crystallize yourself on one role model.
So I think we're hearing networking, mentoring, saying yes, and being yourself, the kind of ingredients or the things you need in your protocol, if we're thinking scientifically. So thank you. Okay, next question. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3. So let's start at the front, just to make the purple T-shirt people walk a bit. And then we'll go to the middle, and then we'll come to this side, okay?
Thank you. It's Azra Meadows from Glasgow University. What a lovely session, and proud of our prestigious awards, and really, really setting the example and tone. I just wanted to ask about your experiences in terms of any hurdles or obstructions which you have encountered to reach to this final stage, and especially the two ladies from, can I say, not the indigenous population. Have you had any, controversial or discriminatory attitudes towards yourselves, or which have not maybe allowed you to achieve what you wanted in your careers? Thank you.
For me, the first barrier were my parents, because they didn't want to make me do chemical engineering. They want me to study mathematics. So I had to convince them, but I had to have a fight and do what I wanted to do. Of course, okay, let me be absolutely honest. If you were asking me this question about 10 years ago, I was saying, no, I have not encountered any discrimination. But then when I now reflect on my past, everything that I see and I reinterpret some of the things that I had, actually they were discrimination. But I didn't want to think that they were discrimination, because I didn't want to be told that they were doing something so bad to me. At the end of the day, I'm here in the UK because I was discriminated, because essentially in the place where I work, was before I was clearly told that there was a man that had to get the promotion before me, despite he had less publications than me. So it is, and at the end, at the time, I thought it's only because that professor likes that person better than me, they are friends, and I didn't think that there was a discrimination. It was a discrimination, of course, but I think that when you are younger, you don't want to see that like discrimination. I didn't want to see that, and that was wrong. So I think that it's very good that now people speak up. And yes, there have been many discriminations, but I think the best thing to do is just to, now you can speak up and say that there is a discrimination. In my times you couldn't, but just find another way to achieve what you want to do. Unfortunately, in my case, I had to leave the country. But like I said, I was at the right time, in the right place. So it gave me, I had many more opportunities. So every time that there is something like, I wanted to work in a field and I didn't take the opportunities there. So I turned it around, the barrier in terms of opportunities.
Thank you.
So I suppose another early one, not parents, but sorry, Lesley, chemistry teacher. I know, a male chemistry teacher who actually said, you're not up to doing 3 sciences. And, point made before, they may not have actually been my strongest subjects academically, but I was prepared to put the work in, and I knew at some stage I wanted a career in science. So, I kind of rebelled and went to the head of year and turned that around. But and that was him overhearing me having a discussion with my peers, not even me seeking career advice explicitly from him. So that was quite interesting. So I moved on from there. And then I guess the barriers since, back to the point I made before, strangely, for me moving into business, not gender, but age, and the fact that I'm a scientist. How could I want to kind of continue to lead a company? Surely I'll step back to somebody who has the business experience and let them do it. So that was a real surprise, and that's certainly changed over the last 20 years. But I'd say those were my 2 barriers. One was a fairly defined one, and the other has just been an environment that certainly has improved. But yeah.
See, there's no greater motivation than being told you can't, is there? In the interest of time, because we've only got a few moments left, I'm going to move us on to the question in the middle. So if we could have the blue jacket.
Hello. So I work in academia and in computer science, and I suppose it's a bit what you were touching on about not realizing discrimination or not realizing things like this. One of my huge problems is imposter syndrome and lack of confidence, and I think that's something that I never wanted to recognize it, but I think it is something that's more prevalent in the female population, especially when there's old boys networks and things. I was wondering if you had any advice on, firstly, I guess, how to recognize that perhaps you are you have imposter syndrome, because for me, I didn't put myself into jobs for tech and things because I thought, I don't have every single one of the criteria. And I'd found out my male colleagues were just like, well, who cares? I can learn that on the job. And I guess for me to learn that attitude was quite difficult. So if you had any advice for that, and just how to recognize that perhaps maybe you do have a bit of imposter syndrome.
So I think the counterpart to the imposter syndrome is fake it till you make it, right? So it's which of those 2 you take. And I think it's the way I view and the way it has helped me is that because you are different, because it's of gender or background or whatever else defines you as being different, you're actually bringing to them something that they do not have. And it's how do you get that message that sometimes is really what is the complex or the complexity here is really because I'm whatever different characteristics you are bringing a value that currently they don't have that currency. And I think that's for me what it has helped me, rather than thinking, the 2 opposite extremes of I should not be here I'm an imposter too. What we see in many other colleagues sometimes that they fake it till they make it, right? I think it's finding that common ground where you are, again, true to yourself, as I said before, and you're bringing them a currency that they don't have. And if they don't get it, they will get it eventually. They may not get it the first time around, but they probably realize that they were at a loss when they let you go. And I think that's important. We just help each other and get that message in.
Well, I suffer from imposter syndrome. I think probably most of us here do. And that in itself you must take that away with you. You must realize that most people do suffer it at one point or another, if not all the time. And so stop thinking that you're unique, you're the only person that has this. You're not, okay? When I was much younger, and I can still remember, but when I was younger and I was asked to sit on quite a prestigious committee that was looking at, it doesn't matter what we were looking at, but anyway, there was me, there was one other woman, and the rest were all men, much older than me, and grey-haired. And boy, did I feel an imposter sitting in that meeting. And I realised, though, that either I could let it get to me and I wouldn't contribute, and that somebody, I would be put on this committee. So what I forced myself to do was, in the first 5 minutes of, these were regular meetings, of these meetings, was I forced myself to ask a question or make a comment. And having done that, I found the weight just came right off me. I enjoyed being at that meeting then, because I'd made I'd contributed, and so I knew how to do it. And from then on, I tried to always do that, is to contribute as quickly and as soon as you can and stop that imposter syndrome getting to you, so that it shuts you up, so that you don't say anything. And then you just come out at the end of the meeting feeling even worse than when you went in. So that would be my tip that I learned about myself fairly quickly, and it worked for me. I think it's finding what it works for you, but please realise that we all feel it.
You're absolutely right. You should have seen me when I got the email inviting me to chair this. Still no. Thank you. I think we've literally got time for your question, and then we'll have to...
Hi, I'm Rona, and I'm at Broughton High School, just in Stockbridge. I'm in S5, and I'm doing chemistry and biology. At the moment, it's quite difficult. I think the thing I want to ask, or kind of ask for advice for, is I find it really difficult, like picturing, like the different like atoms and DNA and stuff. Just because I can't like see it, I can't picture it. It's not like geography where there's hills and stuff. But I find it so interesting. But I just don't understand how it's real, kind of. So I guess, what could help me with that?
Ooh, it's like looking back at myself. Yeah, geography and history are so much flipping easier, aren't they? I think that the theory's hard, definitely. And if chemistry or biology, any kind of science subjects are something you want to pursue, you'll start to do more and more practical things, so more and more experiments, which you don't really do a lot of in S5, S6 even. So it's when you get to university, if you want to do university or even college, and once you start doing the practical experiments, and this is where the light bulb went on for me, it makes sense. And even though you can't see them, you're seeing how they're interacting, and you're seeing a consequence of those atoms interacting, or what's happening to that DNA, and it will just click. So it's difficult, because when you're not doing the practical side of it, I completely hear you, it's quite tough. So don't put yourself under too much pressure, because, as you say, these are things that you can't see. We know that they're there, and you're not really going to get to see them interacting as yet, but it will click once you start doing the practical side of things. It certainly, for me anyway, it started to make sense, and I loved it from then on. And I think that's why I struggled. And I said, yeah, history, geography, much easier. But as soon as I got into the lab and started doing things practically and actually doing the experiments, loved it. And it made much more sense.
Well, I cannot say anything about DNA. So I don't think I can really help about that. But I think that, even in engineering, sometimes there are things that you don't see. And I think that, it's just trying to, if you like it, try to understand what is the part that you like it and how it fit into the story. And then at one point it will click it in. But I think it's just matter of understanding how things interact with each other. And the most important thing, I think that if you want to look at DNA per se, probably it's not going to make life easier, but probably look at what DNA is in relation to other things, and that probably you start to understand what is the purpose of that. But like I said, I don't know anything about that DNA. So.
I would just say to you, talk to people, discuss it. You've spoken, you've enunciated, you've posed your question beautifully. So just pose those questions to yourself, but to your teachers, to your friends. Just ask them how they visualize it, because they may have come up with talk to various people. There's no one way of visualizing anything. It's up to you how you do it, and you've got to find that way. And the only way you can do that, you can read your books, of course you can. You can watch films, you can watch videos, you can do that. But the best way is to speak to people. And you're great. Go and speak to people about it, and you'll find out the answer. That's how you're going to get the answer, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's a pretty wonderful piece of advice, actually. So please do. And, again, Dr. Lesley. Right, listen, folks, I'm afraid we have come to the end of our time together, although it certainly doesn't feel like it at all. So I want to thank you very much for coming, and I obviously want to thank my fellow panellists. So Dr. Deborah O'Neil, Professor Mercedes. Oh, sorry, I'm going to have to look. I need to get my specs on and everything. Oh, gosh. Oh, no, I actually had it on the right page and everything. I'm going to start again, okay? So, Dr. Deborah O'Neil, Professor Mercedes Maroto-Valer, Professor Raffaella Ocone, and Professor Lesley Yellowlees. Please remember there are still more curious events that you can take part in. So, safe journey home. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again.